With the closed beta of Marvel Rivals finally ending, we know exactly what characters are the most broken and the least powerful. So we're going to be making a buffs, nerfs, and rework tier list, talking about what should happen to these Marvel Rivals characters, whether they need massive buffs before the next playtest, massive nerfs, or giant reworks to their entire kit. We're going to be breaking it all down, but definitely smash that subscribe because I have a lot of Marvel guides and videos coming soon, so you're definitely going to want to see those, and let's jump into it. Then to tell you a little bit about me, my name is Coach Mills. I'm an Overwatch and esports FPS coach, and I got into the Marvel's Rival playtest. As of this playtest, it's my first one, and I did get in a little bit late. I only had about 4 days to play, but in that time, I did grind to just outside of top 100, and I did it on many different characters. I mainly played DPS, but I also played a good amount of tank and support as well, and I got to experience a lot of different characters and play against every single character, so I know exactly what the meta is and exactly what is being played the most, and characters that most likely need some changes or tweaks going into the next playtest. Now, as far as the categories are concerned, it's buff, nerf, or self-explanatory. We have rework, which is the category that you want to put a character if they need a complete change in their kit. Like, I don't think that their kit fully embodies them, or maybe their kit is frustrating to play against to the point where a small buff and nerf wouldn't be reasonable for the character, so you'd put them in the rework category. Quality of life is just something is not quite flowing on the character and just needs a little bit of tweaks. Could be a bug, could be a key press, whatever it is. It's just something that needs a quality of life change. And then no changes is pretty self-explanatory as well, so let's jump into it. Now, the first character is actually the Hulk, and I actually think that the Hulk is really powerful in the right hands. He creates a lot of pressure and space. He's really good at forcing objectives because he has a lot of mobility, so he can do things like pushing to point. If people are fighting for the high ground, he can touch that point, force people to go and contest, and then jump up to the high ground and actually commit to the fight. He's really good at harassing backlines, and overall, I think that he's probably like a more healthy Venom. He does a very similar dive style of play, but a little bit more healthy, not quite as oppressive. He has a lot of vulnerabilities as well if you don't time your jumps right, but really I would say that the character is actually in a good state. I don't necessarily think he needs any buffs or nerfs. I think he's a reasonable character. Well, so I do think that you could actually make an argument to buff the Hulk, making his bubble activate a lot quicker so he can't get CC'd out of it. I would say that if you're gonna buff him, just buff him slightly and then see where he lands from there. So I'm gonna put him in no changes, the no changes category. Now, as far as Venom is concerned, this character needs a buff because he's honestly so easy to kill. I'm just kidding. This character needs a freaking nerf. This character is incredibly hard to kill. You have to focus a certain CC on him at the last moment, but you can't do it too late because if he gets too low, he just gets a crazy amount of health. And I don't necessarily think his survivability is the core problem to the character. It's the survivability combined with the really fast mobility combined with the like the damage output that he can put out. He's a very strong character. Of course, as you start to climb the ranks, like in the highest ranks of play, he wasn't actually that dominant. There was other characters that were shining a little bit above him, but I think for multiple ranks and like most ranks in general, he is a bit too oppressive, especially in the hands of someone that really knows how to use him, and I really don't think that people have mastered him all that much yet. So I do think maybe reeling back his survivability a little bit, or maybe reeling back his damage a little bit. One of the two could be reasonable. So yeah, I'm gonna say some slight nerfs to the character, especially after you nerf some of the other characters I'm gonna talk about on this list. I would say that Venom probably needs nerfs as well. Now, something some people might not know is that once you get to diamond lobbies, you actually have picks and bans. It's also in the tournament system, but if you get to a high enough elo, characters will get banned, one character on each team, and teams could actually ban the exact same character as well. And the number one character that was banned the most is definitely Magneto. There's another character that we'll talk about in a little bit, and it's not a surprise that this next character is banned a ton as well, but Magneto is just completely dominant. And when I play tank, the main tank that I play is Magneto. I typically will fill to tank, and the reason I play Magneto is he kind of just does everything. He is incredibly difficult to kill. He can bubble himself. He can bubble a teammate. So bubbling himself is going to allow him to be able to deal more damage, have more CC on his alternate fire. But in addition to that, he's just not going to die. And he also has a shield that makes it really hard to kill, and you could cycle those abilities pretty fast. In addition to that, you can bubble a teammate. And there's a lot of characters that really benefit from a bubble. A lot of characters can get a ton of value from a bubble, whether it's freaking Spider-Man, whether it's Black Panther, it's any of the other tanks in the game. A lot of characters get a ton of value out of that bubble. Just because you can alternate them a little bit too fast, I think you could probably increase that cooldown a little bit. In addition to that, his ultimate is pretty strong. I don't think it's like one of the strongest ults in the game, but it's still a very, very strong ultimate in the right hands. You combine him with Scarlet Witch, and he's incredibly powerful at being aggressive as well. So he kind of just does a little bit of everything. And coming from my Overwatch background, looking at Magneto, he's just like a Sigma that is incredibly bust. Like, there's just so much of this character. You could take away like 2 of his abilities and he would still be super, super strong. Like, Magneto is already like, he's the best tank even without Scarlet Witch as your pairing. He's just that, he's that good. And I say this as someone who's played him a lot. I think he probably deserves nerfs. Any character that's getting banned to that amount probably deserves nerfs. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in the nerf category. Next up is Groot. I think Groot is another reasonable character. I don't think that he needs any massive buffs or anything. You could maybe justify some slight buffs to the character. I think that it's very easy to go too far with buffs on this character because his kit is strong, right? He has walls that he can create space with. He can block off enemies from entering sites. There's a lot of cool parts of his kit. I think really just compared to some of the other more dominant tanks right now, he's maybe a little bit underpowered. So you could maybe justify some slight buffs to the character, but I would probably say some no changes to the character overall. Maybe some slight buffs. I want to kind of pass the question off to you, especially those of you who play this character a lot. How do you feel about this character? Do you think this character deserves some buffs? Let me know down below. Doctor freaking Strange. Doctor freaking Strange. So I'm of the opinion, not everyone agrees with this opinion. I've talked to several other people that play in tournaments and such, and they don't all agree. But I think that Doctor Strange's ultimate is like a top 5, maybe even top 3 ultimate. I think it's very, very strong. Yes, there's ways to counter it and shut it down and potentially disable it, but the window is so tiny that I think maybe having it to where the window is slightly bigger is better. Now, maybe it's too hard to shut down then. It's similar in a lot of ways to like a way, way, way better Scarlet Witch ult. Because like Scarlet Witch's ult is like, she shouts that, "Hey, I'm coming!" And she comes in really slowly and she can be focused down and you can get behind line of sight and either kill her or just dip behind line of sight. Doctor Strange basically happens instantly. And in coordinated lobbies, you just die. Like, if you get hit by it, you're dead. It's not like, maybe I'm dead. It's like, no, you're dead. Unless there's like a defensive ult that happens or whatever. So, you know, I don't think it needs to be that obvious. Like, hey, I'm ulting. But I think it's a little bit too fast. So I would probably say a slight nerf in that regard. But maybe it's like an exchange where you make that ult a little bit more punishable, but then you buff him in some other regard. I don't know exactly what the perfect ratio is, but I don't think him as a character is overly strong, even though he is one of the stronger tanks. I just think that having a small, like a more reasonable way to interact with that ultimate on a slightly bigger time frame could be cool. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is Penny Parker. And Penny Parker is definitely one of the weaker tanks in the game right now. And it's not necessarily because the character just has like a weak kit overall. It's just space denial is not really that great except against some types of characters. Like, some characters just don't care also about the space denial that Penny Parker provides. Any character that flies, will scale rooftops, those characters just don't care about the space denial. And you can get really tricky with how you're placing your mines, and oftentimes getting like some of those cheeky kills with those mines rely on player error. So I like player mistake, and I don't think that they're going to work as well as players get better and better. Really, I think that you could probably buff this character. There is maybe even an argument that you could maybe change the ult as well. I think it's one of the weaker ults in the game, one of the less impactful ults in the game. So maybe you could argue some amount of reworks for this character, some amount of changes to the kit. I would probably change her kit a little bit, give her a little bit more versatile abilities, and in addition to that, most likely change that ultimate. Yeah, overall, it would be a buff for the character, but I think that area denial stuff is not really that great when there's a lot of characters that just really do not care about the space that you're denying. It's actually very rare that a character will care about it unless it's just like randomly lucked into it, right? Like Black Panther cares maybe, or like some of these more niche characters that don't even really see a lot of play. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in the rework category. Thor's another character that I think Thor actually deserves buffs. And you might not resonate with this because at the beginning I was like, oh damn, Thor's busted. What the heck? He's killing everybody. And in a lot of my lobbies, it was like Thor dominating, like a 30-2 Thor. I was like, damn. And then I as I was climbing, it was like another Thor. I was like, damn. As I got higher and higher and higher, and then I started playing in some high diamond and some low GM lobbies. I didn't see any freaking Thors. Thors just didn't exist. He was just too easy to punish with focus fire. He didn't have great ways to stay alive. When he's not focused down, he is basically like, I get to do whatever I want. But when people start CCing him and focusing him down and hitting headshots on Hela on him and all that stuff, he just falls over. So yeah, I would say probably buffs, maybe buffing his survivability a little bit more, I think would probably be reasonable on the character. It's kind of a tricky thing though, because characters can be like too dominant maybe in some elos, and then if you try to only bounce from the top down, I can only speak to what I see, so maybe that would make him too strong, but I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I think that he probably is one of the weaker tanks in the game, and you could probably buff him and he'd be fine. Just do it in a way that's hard to access without a lot of skill, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. We're moving on to more of the DPS category of characters. First character we got to talk about, Scarlet freaking Witch. So her ultimate, pretty atrocious. It's too easy to shut down, especially when, I mean, people can just kind of, you know, line of sight it. People can deny it with abilities. She could just die like really, really fast. You could probably speed up the activation of the ultimate. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Overwatch's Diva Bomb a little bit. But Hela's, when they start hitting their shots, like you're just going to die on that. But even in spite of that, she's a pretty reasonable character. She's really good at like contesting a lot of flankers. She's really good at shutting those characters down. She can flank herself. She has great mobility. I don't really think that there's anything that wrong with the character besides maybe her ultimate, but I don't think every character needs a super powerful ultimate, and her ultimate has such a high peak that maybe, like, you know, Magneto bubbling it in and doing that kind of stuff is worth the effort, like worth the setup. A high risk, high reward ultimate, I think, is also like pretty fun and kind of worth it. I'm gonna say that that Scarlet Witch probably doesn't need any changes. I think it's a reasonable character overall. A little bit hard to punish maybe because she has two teleports. But I think overall just a reasonable character. Right now she might feel like she's a little bit too powerful just because of the package deal with Magneto, because of how strong Magneto is. Yeah, overall I'm gonna say no changes. Next up, we do gotta talk about Black Panther. Yeah, Black Panther is too damn weak, but I'm not sure if it's because of him, okay? So I hate to always compare it to Overwatch, because some of the people watching this video might not even play Overwatch, but there's a character in Overwatch called Genji. Surprise, surprise, everyone knows Genji. But Genji doesn't struggle because of himself. He struggles because of the ability to rapid heal and the ability to peel, which is to bail out somebody. And in Marvel Rivals, that is to a crazy extent. There's a crazy amount of peel, to the point where most of the time, if you're trying to go in with Black Panther, unless you have multiple other characters going in with you, baiting out all these cooldowns, you're gonna get stunned, you're gonna get shot in the head by a Hela, you're gonna get killed. Unless you have your ultimate, it's gonna be really hard to burst people down. But like, similar to a character like Genji, you buff Black Panther a little bit too much, and all of a sudden he's spear, dash, kick, dash, spear, dash, ult, kill everybody, you know, just freaking shade off. And I played Black Panther a lot at the start when I was first climbing, but as I started climbing higher, he became harder and harder and harder to play. When there's characters like Adam Warlock that just like, oh, you did all this work to get like 2 or 3 people low. Well, guess what? They're all to full now, and you don't have a way to get out. Or your way to get out was to kill everybody. Or like, now you can get out, but you wasted all your time and you risked your own life. Like, there's a lot there. So I would say buffs. Buffs to the character, small buffs to the character. We'll talk a little bit more about Adam Warlock later, because that's my most played support, and I have a lot of words for that character. But yeah, I'm gonna put Black Panther up in the buff tier for sure. We gotta talk about Magic. I think Magic is reasonable. Magic is not really that great in a lot of the more attrition-based situations. She feels more of like a solo carry, chaotic character. That's good in some situations, but she is a little bit hard to work in a similar way to Black Panther, but I think she's overall better than Black Panther. But just these melee characters feel like they have to risk a lot for things that can really get, like, it's so easy to just get one of your kills, like they get bailed out, right? You can get CC'd and then just die. They can get freaking healed up to full like instantly. They can get bubbled by Magneto. You know, there's just like a lot of it's like more high risk, low reward. I don't necessarily think she needs buffs per se. I'm not entirely sure what is the most reasonable path for her, but it does make sense that she synergizes with Black Panther with the teleport, and I could see like a world where a composition forms that is incredibly dive oriented can become very, very strong. So like a Magic, Panther, Venom, Banner comp, but that requires like a crazy amount of communications that it's gonna be hard to get. I'm gonna say probably no changes for now, but maybe you could argue that it does need some buffs, but maybe that healing is just too strong for a dive composition to work. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna put her in no changes for now. Hela. Remember when I talked about the other character that was nerfed or that was banned the most? It was Hela. It was Hela by a lot. It was in the dark, you banned either Magneto or you banned Hela. You didn't know which one to pick. Hela is just so freaking powerful. Being able to 2-tap anything in the game is just crazy. I mean, not anything in the game, any squishy in the game, not the tanks, but there's a lot of tanks that you could just dink, 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 and tanks that don't have like a shield. So like not Strange and not Magneto would just eat dink, 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 like lots of dinks over and over and over again. But in some ways, it feels like Hela's a necessary evil because there's characters like Iron Man that just get to sit there and spam and spam and spam and spam. There's characters like Scarlet Witch that get to float around and do what they want. But yeah, I think Hela's just too strong, too powerful, and she's not just strong because she's super effective from long ranges, right? She doesn't really have that much weaknesses because she has a CC that is good to just throw on tanks on the front line. When I had a lot of pop-off games on Hela, she was one of the 3 DPS I played more than any other DPS. So the 3 DPS I mainly played was Hela, Iron Man, and then Punisher, but in the earlier ranks, it was Black Panther. But Hela, specifically, she's super good in a ton of situations. She's good from far ranges. She can just CC the front line, and oftentimes that can be enough to kill a tank just by stalling them for a second, dinking them once in the head. She can deny people diving her because she can just CC them, and she has a great mobility that literally turns her into a bird that removes her from the fight. It's not like she's moving, she's literally out. Like, she's out of the fight. So like mid combo, you're getting comboed by Spider-Man, you like dink him on the way in, or you hit him on the way in, then you freaking yeet away, and then you turn around and you hit him again. Like, it's so strong because she just kind of does everything. She just does everything a little bit too well. And I think you either need to make her a glass cannon where maybe you weaken that mobility, make her more vulnerable to diving, so you keep her strength the same and make her easier to kill and dive, or you weaken that level of damage, that level of burst. But maybe that ruins some of her identity, makes it harder for her to deal with characters like Iron Man. I'm always a fan of keeping the skill ceiling high, but maybe in this case you reduce the headshot damage and increase the bishot damage. I really do think like that mobility thing is where you want to do it, where it's like either a much longer mobility cooldown or you don't move nearly as far. Like, it's a really short movement. I think that would be the reasonable thing to do, but definitely, like, it's for sure that this character needs nerfs. It's one of the most overpowered characters in the game for sure. Now, Iron Man is my most played character. I played Iron Man more than any other character. It was especially nice when I could ban Hela's. But it did feel like if Hela and like if there was 2 bans, like if I could ban Hela and Punisher, I would just be unstoppable on Iron Man because he does so much damage to backlines. Like, you basically play the skybox, and I play a lot of Pharah in Overwatch, so I kind of understand like playing the top of buildings, and that's kind of what you do with Pharah these days, is you spam from range and do a lot of that stuff. You do the same thing with Iron Man. You kind of sit skybox, you sit around some of these buildings and you jiggle in and out, and you're just spamming the backline, putting a ton of pressure on a lot of the backline supports that just have to constantly pump resources just to stay alive because you're just spamming. And then you're playing not pretty proactive because if you go too far, you're going to get killed by a Punisher or a Hela. But you do that, you see anyone out of position, and then eventually you farm a really quick ultimate, you ult, and you like win a fight, right? It's super strong. But there are characters that just kind of shut you down, right? And mainly it's mainly Hela and it's mainly Punisher. Those characters are kind of like the characters that could shut you down. Star-Lord to an extent, although he didn't see nearly as much play, but he can definitely shut you down as well. I think that Iron Man is reasonable overall. I don't love the fact that he does feel feast or famine, where it's like either the person that is supposed to counter you is not good enough to stop you so that you just get to do whatever you want, or if those characters didn't exist, you would just be unstoppable. I don't love that, but I also do think that Iron Man's a character that like prevents like a triple tank, triple support. So that's like kind of an ongoing argument, is like, should Marvel Rivals have a lock of, you know, should they be able to do 3 tanks, 3 supports, or should that be 2-2-2, or should it be whatever? Characters like Iron Man, where they feel very, very oppressive against a composition that doesn't have the way to directly deal damage to him when he's up in the air. It's like Iron Man just completely destroys a triple, like a 3 tank, 3 support comp. Now, like, I mean, Adam Warlock can like pepper you a little bit, but like it's nothing compared to like a Hela or a Punisher. So then they have to swap that, and then the composition is no longer 3-3. So in a way, I think he's healthy because he's a character that, especially once people understand this, it prevents some of those more dominant, super hyper sustained compositions, I think. But maybe not, because there's ways to mitigate his ultimate, and if he can't get kills with his ultimate, then he's gonna spam, but they're gonna heal. So, you know, it's a little bit of a tricky thing there, but overall, I think he's actually fine. But I would keep an eye on him, because there could be a world where, especially if they do more picks and bans, maybe it's 2 per team or whatever, there could be a world where he gets a little bit too dominant. So I would keep an eye on Iron Man a little bit. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is Luna, and Luna is one of the most powerful characters in the game right now. Very consistent heals, but the most important thing really is the ult. The ult is crazy strong. Being able to heal up your team, being able to speed your team in, that is just a crazy combination, and it's so freaking strong. Perhaps too strong. Maybe you could argue that it's too strong. It's really enabling a lot of really like slower compositions, and you can win a lot of fights off that. Whether you're using it aggressively, whether you're using it as a counter ult, it's just so damn powerful, I think. I don't necessarily think that the character needs nerfs, but maybe she does. I'm not 100% sure. It's a little bit close. I think that perhaps maybe a small nerf. I think the character is actually reasonable. But it's close. It's close to being a character that deserves the nerf. I personally think that Adam Warlock is a little bit stronger, and I'll get to talking about that why. I mean, they pair really well together. Don't get me wrong. But I'm gonna put nerf, but slight. I think ultimate nerf, just a really, really slight ultimate nerf would be reasonable on this character. Maybe make it so that ultimate takes longer to charge, probably, because what's happening is I feel like Lunas sometimes get ultimates first in the lobby. Like, they get ultimates way too quickly, and it should be one of the it's such a powerful ult that it should be one of the more difficult ults to get, in my opinion. I would put it in the nerf category. Just a small ult charge nerf, probably. Next up is Punisher. Punisher is a very strong character. He's a very reasonable character. I don't necessarily think he's overpowered. I think he plays to a lot of strengths of people that have prior FPS knowledge, and he's also, like, once again, one of those necessary evils where he can output a ton of damage to the frontline tanks. He can keep characters like freaking Iron Man in check, and I think overall he's just a reasonable character. He's strong. He's reasonable. I think he's a good character overall, and I would probably say no changes. I don't think that there's any real need for any changes to him. Some people might argue that he deserves nerfs, but I think that he is just a fine character, and he's like a good, solid all-arounder, and I think having a grounded character like that is good. A character that, well, punishes, you know, some of the inting that goes on. He can output a lot of damage if people are in open space or jumping on your supports. You could peel for your team. I'm gonna put him in no changes. I think that's reasonable. Star-Lord. What do we do with Star-Lord? This character really felt very, very weak once I started going up against some really, really good players. He doesn't really do any damage from range, and he's not really a character that can just play in the enemy backline as a self-sufficient character. He can't really do that. You can kind of go from pack to pack, but it's not really that reasonable to do that. There are worlds where he can be really, really strong. Maybe it's just a different meta overall that he could be really, really strong in. But yeah, right now, don't really feel so. I almost feel like, because right now you can't start his jets when he's mid-air. You can only start him when he's on the ground. I think maybe allow him to do that. Allow him to fly a bit more. Maybe that's a little bit too strong, but I would prefer a gauge so he doesn't have unlimited flight, but he doesn't have to be on the ground to use it. I think that is more reasonable because he's a character that wants to do a lot of hit and runs, right? He wants to and then get over the rooftop and then shoot. It's weird that he has to be on the ground. Like, it really limits him, and he's not a character that can really burst out of an area really, really quickly. He's not, like, people love to compare him to Tracer, but he can't recall to get his health back or get out of a fight completely. He can't triple blink out. Like, he's just gonna get shot by Hella and killed. So yeah, I would say that is technically a buff, but I'm gonna put it in quality of life because it's kind of a minor one. Peter Parker, I think this character is reasonable. I don't think this character is too strong. I don't think this character is weak. I think this character is very, very powerful, but not overpowered. There's a lot to love about this character, but there's also a lot of ways to just shut him down. Now, in a world where you see some buffs, some nerfs to some of these characters, perhaps he gets too strong. I could see him being kind of oppressive in like a more dive-ish meta. But for right now, I think he's reasonable, and I would say no changes. I think he's fine. I would say so. Storm. I think Storm's another reasonable character. Nothing completely broken about this character. Nothing that weak about this character. Definitely, I think fine. I think actually just a fine character. Nothing that needs like crazy buffs or crazy nerfs. You could probably do some slight buffs to the character, just some really, really minor buffs to the character. But I think right now no changes is reasonable. Loki. This is probably the weakest support, or definitely close to the weakest support. Jeff and Loki are the two weakest. I'm going to put Loki in the buff category. I think Loki just doesn't do quite enough to justify his pick. He provides a lot less utility than the four strongest supports. Mantis, Luna, Adam Warlock, and Rocket are all fantastic, and I don't really see any reason why you would ever play Loki over any of those characters. Yeah, I'm going to put him in the buff category. I think some buffs it would be reasonable. Rocket. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one with Rocket, because I think Rocket is the cause of a lot of these fights that never freaking end, okay? The never-ending teleport fights, and maybe a world where there's characters that flank more, maybe in a more dive-centric meta, maybe people would kill his turrets more. Maybe it's just kind of one of those things where once people learn it a bit more, they know to shut it down a bit more. They know to flank it. They know to kill it. They know it's worth even trading your life for. It's a really long cooldown, a really, really long cooldown. But like, yeah, when you start combining Rocket with Punisher, like the combo is just so freaking strong. I think the character overall is reasonable. I just think specifically that TP, that teleporter, is one of the more frustrating aspects overall. It's either something that like people find and it does nothing, or it's the never-ending fight generator, just the never-ending freaking fight generator. But I guess it's reasonable because he's kind of fighting for a slot as like a secondary support in a roster to Adam Warlock, which is another really, really freaking strong character. I would probably say slight nerfs to the ult, where even if someone comes back in the teleporter, I don't think it should be quite as fast. I think it should be a little bit slower. Just a little bit slower than that. It shouldn't be like you die and you're back. I think that's a little bit too quick. I think it should just be, if your team can keep the fight up, you're going to be back a lot quicker, but you're not going to be back instantly, right? I think that's a more reasonable take on the ultimate. But other than that, a character's really, really solid. He has a lot of ways to fight back. He has great mobility. He has great heals. I mean, he's a really solid character overall, and even without his ultimate and a different ultimate, he would still be fine. I don't want to get rid of his ultimate, but I do think that some of the really frustrating, really annoying fights where it's like, it feels like you're fighting and fighting and fighting. You're never really in a situation where you can go push it, you know, push the respawn beacon. Yeah, that's a little bit too much. Adam Warlock. This is the character that when I play support, I play Adam Warlock. I would filter support, filter tank. I ended up playing both of them quite a bit, not as much as DPS, but as an individual character, I had my pick where it split between several different DPS, but I had it maxed out the most on Adam Warlock. And I'm gonna tell you right now that this character is probably like a top 3 character in the game, maybe top 5. He is just so freaking strong, and he's one of the main reasons why I think a lot of divers are not that good. He can connect everyone's health totals, which makes it really hard to kill people. And between the 2 packs that heal him and everyone around him in a chain, characters that are 0 can be full instantly. That to me is too strong. And I say that as someone who abused it a lot to climb. Being able to have 3 people on your team, like almost dead to full HP instantly is like ultimate tier. That's like an ultimate about how powerful that is. You get a kill and you have packs, you double pack Link and go in and just wipe. The enemy are really all up on you and they're overextending into you. They think they're about to kill your whole team. You double pack and your whole team is full. It's so freaking strong. And not to mention, this character does a lot of consistent damage. On top of that, not to mention, his ultimate is completely absurd. I mean, it's so freaking strong. You can res the entire team. Now, that being able to res wouldn't be that big of a deal because he could die, but he can resurrect himself and then res the entire team. That combination is just absurd. And I understand that like everything in this game is like a little bit busted. That's kind of the allure to it, but it's a little too far. It's a little too far with Adam Warlock, in my opinion. However, I think the biggest weakness to the character is the fact that he has no mobility, right? He could be dove. Unfortunately, right now at the highest ranks, dive characters are not that great. It's not dive, it's poke, it's attrition, right? So in a more dive-based meta, Adam Warlock would be balanced out relative to that. But right now, I think it's just a little bit absurd. And the way that I would probably change it, if I had to say like one way or another to change it, I'm not convinced that him being able to resurrect himself is a reasonable ability in the first place. I'm also not really that convinced that being able to double pack really fast and heal yourself and everyone else around you is reasonable either. So those are the two things that I would probably look at. I would probably say some slight nerfs to the character overall in some of the many regards, but like I said, in a more aggressive based meta where, you know, characters like Spider-Man, characters like Black Panther, you know, characters like Star-Lord see more play and he's more vulnerable, characters like Magic, then, you know, then it might be more, you know, he might be more reasonable. So he does, because he's not like Rocket that has great mobility, but I think he just provides so much and his damage is just so crazy. He's just a nuts character, and I do think that he needs to be nerfed in some regard. But yeah, in another meta, I could see him as fine, but we would have to see what that meta is before I could make that decision. Namor. I think Namor is a reasonable character. I would say maybe as a quality of life, some way to, maybe he talks it or something, but I want to see some way to track his turrets a bit better. Sometimes his turrets die. You throw up a turret, you think it's fine, it's dead, or, you know, some of the turrets go away even when you get the synergy, and they just kind of disappear. You can only have 2 out. I do think it would be cool to like have some visual indicator that's easier to see, or him just talking about turret down, turret up, turret disappearing, you know, something like that, just a little bit. But overall, I think he's a fine character. He's a reasonable character. He's strong. He's actually pretty good. I'm gonna put him in quality of life. Jeff is one of the weaker characters in the game. I'm actually going to put him in the buff tier. I think that Jeff is a bit underpowered overall. I think he's probably the weakest support in the game right now. He's probably the weakest. His ultimate, while it looks really cool, it doesn't really do a lot, and you can get shot while people are sucked in the ultimate. His heals are pretty decent, actually, the bubbles and stuff, but his damage doesn't make up for it. Like, maybe you need to do more damage overall with the character. And the mobility aspect of him being able to like go on walls and stuff like that, like, it's cute, but it doesn't make him like stronger, really. It's just kind of like most of the time it's not going to be that relevant, right? I think he just needs some buffs in several different ways. You could probably buff him a lot in different ways. Give him more heal bubbles, give him more damage. There's a lot of little things that you could do to the character, make him a little bit stronger. Maybe give him invulnerability while he's ulting, I think you could probably do. So yeah. Mantis is very freaking strong, but you know, I talked about a lot of the supports. A lot of the supports are ridiculously strong. But I think Mantis is actually the more reasonable ones of these. This one, I only said make her ultimate slightly more expensive. For him, I think making his ultimate a slight delay in the resurrection. And then, so these two are like slight. You could even put these in quality of life because it's really like really slight. But for Adam Warlock, it's like that guy needs nerfs, in my opinion. He's really dominant. For Mantis, I'm going to say no changes. I do think that she is nuts. She is ridiculously nuts. She's just not as strong as some of the other ones. But she is really, really good. By all means, she's really, really good. Maybe after you tweak some of the other ones, you could justify nerfing her. But for the most part, I think that buffing characters is better than nerfing unless there's something really egregious. Because that's kind of the idea behind Marvel Rivals is everything should be busted. Everything should feel strong. So I'm not saying you should nerf everything into the ground. I just think like specifically these characters right here are just like they just do a little bit too much that warp the state of the game in a negative way. And if you wanted to buff characters enough to where these characters were not completely really either frustrating or dominant, you would have to buff things way too much. But yeah, small quality of life / nerfs. It's really minor nerfs here, I would say. But yeah, overall, this is my changes that I would have before the next playtest. Definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with me in the comments down below. This list is actually fact, so you know, regardless of what you say, it's right. I'm just kidding. Definitely let me know down below. This is just my thoughts after grinding the game, but I'm curious how your experiences are different. If you're a main of any of these characters and you think I missed the mark, especially with some of the ones with no changes, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.